The roar of 5,000 people was my oxygen. On stage, under the blinding lights of the Denver Grand Hall, I wasn't the shy kid anymore. I was Ethan Reed, the man who sold fearlessness. My company, Inner Voice Dynamics, was an empire built on my voice. You control your narrative. I thundered, the applause washing over me. My phone vibrated, a text from my assistant Sarah, urgent. I ignored it. But then it buzzed again. And again. A relentless assault. Backstage, I finally glanced down. The screen showed a horrifying thumbnail. My face, years younger, slick with sweat, eyes wide with terror. The title screamed, "Fear Guru's On-Stage Panic Attack." It already had 3 million views. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The phone felt like a lead weight. It wasn't just any panic attack. It was done one. The Denver Tech Summit 10 years ago. The public implosion I'd paid a fortune to bury. Only one person was there with a camera, Marcus Thorne. The memory slammed into me. Marcus, my co-founder, my friend, not helping, just filming. His eyes held a flicker of something I didn't understand then, a vulture's patience. The man I had to cut loose to save the company. The man who swore I'd regret it. Sarah burst in, her face a mask of panic. The board is on fire, our top sponsor just pulled out. Ethan, what do we do? Her voice was a distant buzz. All I could hear was the roar of the crowd outside, a sound that now felt like laughter. I looked at the terrified face on my phone screen, then met my own gaze in the mirror. The fear was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. "Get me everything you can find on Marcus Thorne," I said, my voice dangerously calm. He just declared war. It's time I reminded him who wins. The name echoed, pulling me back 12 years, back to a cramped office above a laundromat that always smelled of bleach and regret. We started Inner Voice Dynamics, or what would become it, with 2 cracked laptops and a shared dream, or so I thought. I had the methodology, the system for conquering fear, born from a lifetime of being terrified of my own shadow. I could write it, chart it, prove it, but I couldn't speak it. Marcus could speak. He had a smile that could disarm a bomb and a voice like warm honey. He was the front man, the talent. In our first major pitch to investors, my throat closed up completely. I remember the slide deck clicking, the expectant faces of the venture capitalists, and the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. I just froze. Marcus didn't miss a beat. He slid my notes from my trembling hands. What my partner, the architect of this entire system, is trying to say is, he didn't just save the presentation, he owned it. He took my words and made them sing. Afterward, he clapped me on the shoulder, a wide, reassuring grin on his face. "That's why we're a team, E," he said, his voice dripping with camaraderie. "You build the engine, I drive the car." For years I believed him. I was the engine, hidden away in the dark, while he drove us to success. But in the background, I was rebuilding myself. Toastmasters meetings in dusty church basements. Reciting speeches to my reflection until my jaw ached. I was forging the very tools I now sold to thousands, testing them on the most difficult subject I knew. Me. Marcus saw the change. He saw the engine wanting to leave the garage. "You're getting a big head, Ethan," he'd say with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Leave the talking to the professionals." His jokes started having an edge, little digs at my self-help project. He saw me not as a partner getting stronger, but as a threat getting closer. Then came the Denver Tech Summit, my first solo keynote. It was meant to be my declaration of independence. Marcus fought me on it. "It's too soon. You'll crash and burn." Backstage, 5 minutes to showtime, he found me. The roar of the unseen crowd was a physical force. He leaned in close, his smile gone, replaced by a cold mask of concern. "Big stage," he whispered, his voice a sliver of ice. "Don't choke." It wasn't a warning, it was a command, a curse. As I stepped into the lights, his words echoed in my head, multiplying, feeding the beast I'd fought so hard to starve. My vision tunneled, the air grew thin, and when I looked to the wings for help, my eyes locking on my partner, I saw him. Not a friend extending a hand, just a silhouette, holding up his phone, his face illuminated by its cold blue light, capturing my personal hell. He wasn't just watching me fall, he was pushing me. The polished chrome of the dressing room faucet reflected a stranger's face, older, harder. The water ran cold over my hands, a ghost of the ice that had flooded my veins 10 years ago. After the summit, I didn't storm off the stage. I collapsed. I found Marcus in the empty green room, casually reviewing the footage on his phone, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. The sound of the door closing made him look up. "Rough one out there, buddy," he said, pocketing the phone. His sympathy was as thin as onion skin. "You filmed me," I said. It wasn't a question. My voice was a raw, shredded whisper. He had the audacity to look offended. "I was documenting it, for us, so we could analyze your triggers, break down what went wrong. It's valuable data." Data? The word felt like acid in my mouth. "I was drowning, Marcus, and you held up a camera to get a better angle." He stood up, his posture shifting from concerned partner to something else, something predatory. "Let's be honest," he said, his voice losing its honeyed tone, becoming flat and cold. "You weren't ready. You were a liability. I saved this company today by making sure our investors saw time step in to handle the crisis, not the founder having a meltdown." That was it, the click of the lock. The final, horrifying realization that the man I'd trusted wasn't my partner. He was my keeper, and he had no intention of ever letting me out of my cage. The buyout was brutal. He knew I needed him gone, and he made me pay for it. Lawyers, non-disclosures, a severance package that felt like extortion. I liquidated everything I had to excise him from my life, to buy back my own name. The day he signed the papers, he stood in the doorway of our old office. He wasn't smiling anymore. "You think this is a victory?" he sneered. "You think you can just erase me? You're nothing without my voice, Ethan. You're just that scared little kid who freezes. And one day, I'm going to make sure the whole world sees it." He held up his phone, tapped the screen, and gave me a chilling grin. "I'll be keeping my data." Now 12 years later, the data was live. Sarah entered my private office, her steps hesitant. She placed a tablet on my mahogany desk. "This is what I found, Ethan." On the screen was Marcus Thorne's life, laid out in a grid of social media profiles and news articles, a string of failed startups, a mountain of debt, a recent, bitter divorce. He wasn't a mastermind, he was a desperate man playing his last card. His weapon was my past. But he'd forgotten something. He had documented my greatest failure. But I had lived through it. I had studied it, broken it down, and built an empire on its ashes. He thought he was showing the world my weakness. I was about to show him his. I looked up at Sarah, the cold resolve from the dressing room now forged into a plan. "Get our legal team on a call," I said, "and book me a flight to San Diego. It's time I paid an old friend a visit." The NDA is ironclad. Our lead counsel, David, confirmed over the speakerphone, his voice a tinny reassurance. "We can hit him with a cease and desist, sue for damages. We can bury him in litigation for breach of contract. It's a slam dunk." Sarah nodded frantically, mouthing, "Do it," from across my desk. The entire company was bleeding, and David was offering a tourniquet. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the panic. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. On the other end of the line, David fell silent. "Ethan?" Sarah whispered, taking a step forward. "What are you talking about? He's destroying us." "He's trying to," I corrected her, leaning back in my leather chair. I looked past her, out the panoramic window at the snow-capped Rockies. "Fighting this in court will take months. The story won't be about our legal victory. It'll be about my panic attack. Marcus wins by just making it a public fight." "So we do nothing?" she asked, her voice cracking with disbelief. "We just let him burn us to the ground?" "We do the opposite," I said, a faint smile touching my lips for the first time all day. "Marcus thinks my past is my weakness. He's forgotten my entire brand is built on turning weakness into strength. He just handed me the greatest marketing tool I've ever had." I saw the understanding dawn on her face, replacing confusion with a spark of awe. "You're going to use it," she breathed. "I'm going to own it," I confirmed, my voice hardening with conviction. "I am the living proof of my system. That man on the screen, terrified and broken, that's the before picture. I am the after." I stood up, the plan solidifying, the fear from hours ago now completely transmuted into fuel. "Get marketing on the line. I want a press release drafted. Title it, 'The Speech I Never Gave: How My Greatest Failure Became My Greatest Success,' and I want you to embed his viral video at the very top." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Embed it? Are you serious?" "Deadly serious. We're not hiding from this, we're running towards it. We will hijack his narrative and make it our own." I picked up my briefcase. "Has the flight been booked?" She nodded, still looking stunned. "First class to San Diego. It leaves in 3 hours." "Good," I said, walking toward the door. "Cancel my meetings for the next 2 days." "What are you going to do when you see him?" she called after me. I paused at the door, turning back to look at her. The cold resolve was now something else, something sharper, a predator's focus. "Marcus thinks this is a war," I said. "He doesn't realize he's just a chapter in my next bestseller." The hum of the jet engine was a meditative drone. I wasn't trying to sleep, I was studying. On the tablet in front of me, I had 2 windows open. On the left, the viral video. My own terrified face, younger, paler, drowning under the stage lights. I watched it on a loop, not with horror, but with the dispassionate focus of a surgeon examining a tumor he'd already removed. I noted the tremor in my hands, the darting of my eyes, the exact moment the feedback loop of panic took over. This wasn't a memory anymore, it was data. On the right window was Marcus Thorne, a digital ghost haunting the fringes of the internet, a LinkedIn profile with a string of 2-month consulting gigs, a Facebook feed full of resentful political rants and blurry photos of cheap beer. His last venture, a crypto-based motivational platform called Thorne Speaks, had dissolved into a flurry of lawsuits and angry comments from investors. He was living in a garden-level apartment in Pacific Beach, a place people lived right after college or right after a divorce. He was a man clinging to the wreckage of his own life, and my past was the only piece of driftwood he had left. The San Diego air was thick with salt and unmet expectations. I took a rideshare, not to the gleaming glass towers of La Jolla, but to a part of the city the postcards ignore. The address led me to a 3-story stucco box, painted a faded, sun-blasted peach. The landscaping consisted of gravel and a few defiant weeds. It smelled of stale cigarettes and damp laundry. I found apartment 1B, its door marred by a long, dark scuff mark. I didn't hesitate. I knocked twice, a sharp, decisive sound that echoed in the quiet courtyard. Seconds later, the door creaked open. And there he was. Time had not been kind. The brilliant smile was still there, but it was a ruin. His hair was thinner, his eyes carried the dull weight of 1,000 disappointments, and his frame was softened by cheap carbs and inactivity. He was wearing a faded t-shirt with the logo of his own failed company on it. For a moment he just stared, his brain struggling to reconcile my presence with his reality. Then, a slow, venomous grin spread across his face. "Ethan Reed," he said, his voice a rasp. "To what do I owe the honor? Did your private jet get a flat? Come to serve me papers?" He leaned against the doorframe, trying to project a power he no longer possessed. "No papers, Marcus," I said, my voice even. I stepped past him into the dim apartment without waiting for an invitation. The place was a monument to failure. Stacks of mail on a wobbly entryway table. A single, sad-looking lamp illuminating a room filled with mismatched, worn-out furniture. A film of dust covered everything. The air was stale with the ghost of microwave dinners. He closed the door, the smugness returning to his eyes. He thought he had me. He thought I was here to plead, to threaten, to rage. He thought he'd finally brought me down to his level. So what then? He sneered, crossing his arms. Come to see the man who finally pulled back the curtain? The whole world knows you're a fraud now, E. Your little empire of bullshit is crumbling. I turned to face him. I let the silence hang for a beat, long enough to become uncomfortable for him. I actually came to thank you, I said. The smirk on his face faltered. What? The video, I continued, my tone as calm as if I were discussing quarterly earnings. It was a brilliant marketing move, unorthodox, I'll admit, but brilliant. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. This is a joke. You're trying to spin this. Spin it? I gave a small, dry laugh. Marcus, I'm not spinning it. I'm embracing it. My team sent out a press release an hour ago. The speech I never gave. We embedded your video right at the top. We're running a new ad campaign, From Panic to Power. I'm going on national television next week to talk about it. To talk about how the man in that video, broken and terrified, used his own system to become the man standing in front of you today. I watched the blood drain from his face. The gears were turning, catching, then grinding to a halt. He was realizing, in slow, horrifying motion, that his nuclear weapon had just been converted into fuel for my rocket ship. You can't, he stammered. People will see you're a fake. They'll see I'm human, I corrected him gently. My brand was never about being born fearless. It's about overcoming fear. You didn't expose me, Marcus. You just gave me my origin story. My book sales are up 300% in the last 2 hours. Pre-orders for my new seminar, Own Your Failure, have already sold out the first venue. His smugness had completely evaporated, replaced by a hollow, sickening despair. His victory, the one thing he'd clung to for a decade, had turned to poison in his hands. He looked around his pathetic apartment as if seeing it for the first time, a physical manifestation of all his bad decisions. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a check. I placed it on the coffee table, next to a stack of pizza flyers. What's that? He whispered, his eyes fixed on the slip of paper. $10,000, I said. A finder's fee. For the archival footage. Consider it a thank you for your contribution to the Inner Voice Dynamics marketing department. I looked at him, at the wreckage of the man who thought my weakness was his strength. For the first time, I felt a sliver of something that wasn't anger. It was pity. You know, I said, walking to the door. You were right about one thing all those years ago. We were a team. I was the engine. You were supposed to be the driver, but you were too afraid to see the engine get a tune-up. You wanted to stay parked in the garage forever. I opened the door and stepped out into the clean, warm air. I didn't look back. I could feel his stare on my back, the silent, impotent rage of a man who had just lit a match and somehow managed to only set himself on fire. The rideshare was silent on the way back to the airport, but my phone was screaming. The vibrations were constant, a frantic Morse code of victory against my leg. It was the same relentless buzzing from backstage, but the meaning had been inverted. It wasn't the sound of an empire collapsing. It was the sound of one being forged in fire. Each notification was a bulletin from the new reality I had created. Forbes, the PR judo flip of the decade. The New York Times, how Ethan Reed weaponized vulnerability. My face was everywhere again, but this time, the terror in my eyes was framed as a prelude to triumph. My phone rang, displaying Sarah's name. I answered, the faint hum of the highway filling the space between us. You're not going to believe this, she said, her voice electric, stripped of the panic from yesterday. The sponsor who pulled out, their CEO, just called me personally. He wants to double their investment and feature you in a national campaign. Tell him my rates have gone up, I said, a ghost of a smile on my lips. I already did, she laughed. Ethan, the Own Your Failure seminar sold out the Denver Grand Hall. We've had to book the arena next door. The book is #1 on Amazon. It's outselling political memoirs and celebrity cookbooks. And Marcus? I asked, my voice steady. There was a pause on the line. Well, she began, that's the interesting part. The internet has a new villain. The comments on his video are brutal. People are calling him a parasite, a predator. They're defending you. Someone dug up his old company's website, Thorn Speaks, and the narrative is flipping. I watched the palm trees blur past the window, green strokes against a perfect blue canvas. I had planted a seed in that dusty apartment, and it was growing into a forest fire. It gets worse for him, Sarah continued, her voice dropping slightly. A reporter from the San Diego Union-Tribune is running an exposé. It seems your origin story inspired some of his old investors to tell theirs. They're forming a group talking about a class action lawsuit. You didn't just give yourself a new narrative, Ethan. You gave everyone Marcus ever wronged a voice. You handed them a spotlight, and he's caught in the beam. This was the part one hadn't fully anticipated, the collateral justice. I hadn't needed to sue him, to bury him in litigation. I just had to tell the truth. His past was a house of cards, and I hadn't blown it down. I'd simply opened a window, and the breeze did the rest. He wasn't a casualty of my war, he was a casualty of his own. Did he cash the check? I asked. He tried to, an hour ago, Sarah confirmed. Mobile deposit. But his bank has frozen his accounts, pending the fraud investigation from the Thorn Speaks investors. Of course. The final, pathetic irony. The $10,000 wasn't a lifeline, it was just enough rope. We hung up as the car pulled up to the departures curb. As I stepped out into the impossibly bright sunlight, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. I didn't need to guess who it was. The message was short. Just 5 words. Why didn't you just destroy me? I looked at the text, at the desperate, pitiful question hanging in the digital ether. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about him. He thought this was about revenge. He saw himself as my enemy, the antagonist in my story. He couldn't comprehend that. To me, he had become irrelevant. Just data. Just a trigger I'd analyzed, a system I'd beaten, a footnote in the book I was still writing. I held my thumb over the screen, over his last plea for significance. Then I pressed delete and walked into the terminal without looking back. The plane climbed through the clouds, leaving the California coastline behind. Below me, the world shrank into a map of itself, an abstract pattern of lights and darkness. The victory didn't feel like a thunderclap. It was a quiet hum, the same frequency as the jet engines, resonating deep in my bones. I thought about his text. Why didn't you just destroy me? The question of a man who only understands demolition. He expected a war, with lawyers and press releases as artillery. He wanted to be a worthy opponent, a villain in a grand drama. To fight him would have been a gift. It would have validated his existence, given his failure meaning. The real victory, the true destruction, was irrelevance. It was turning his all-consuming obsession into a footnote in my own story of triumph. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply outgrown him. We landed in Denver under a blanket of stars. As I stepped into the cool, thin air of home, Sarah sent one last message, a link to a local San Diego news blog. The headline read, "Disgraced entrepreneur Marcus Thorn detained after public disturbance." The article was short. He'd been found in the lobby of a television station shouting incoherently, demanding to tell his side of the story. But nobody was listening. There was no other side to the story anymore. There was only mine. His voice, the one he'd used to build my company and then to tear me down, had been reduced to the desperate ramblings of a broken man. In the back of the car, I saw my reflection in the window, superimposed over the glittering lights of the city I now owned. The face looking back wasn't fearless. Fear is a part of the engine, a warning light. But it was no longer in the driver's seat. I hadn't erased the scared kid from that video. I had honored him. I took his greatest shame and turned it into the foundation of an empire. That was the speech I never gave. And it was the only revenge that mattered. What's a label someone tried to put on you that you went on to completely prove wrong?